Today, the podcast is invaded by the Copper Hoard.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt, and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. All right, guys, before we jump into the awesome interview today, really quickly, if you like this podcast, please consider liking, rating, or reviewing it, or subscribing to it wherever you are listening to it right now. Those things help the show out immensely, and I would greatly appreciate it. Also, if you want to support the show financially, you can do so at patreon.com/dicegeeks. Plus, I have an incredible line of GM resource books that help game masters cut down their prep time and have more fun at the table. You can find these at dicegeeks.com, amazon.com, and drivethrurpg.com. Just search for the Book of Random Tables, and you will find a number of my books and resources. Most are insanely cheap. I mean, insanely. So if you want to check those out, that would be awesome, and they will help you run better games. Now, here's today's interview. It is my pleasure to welcome two guests to the podcast today. Luke C.J. Smith, who is a writer, and Chris Sagovac, who is a game artist and professor of animation, and they are both the masterminds behind the Copper Hoard. Hey, guys, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hello, thank you.
No problem. I always like to start out first-time guests and ask how you got introduced to tabletop role-playing games. So maybe Chris, why don't you start us off? When did you start pretending to be like a wizard or a barbarian or something?
Well, it goes all the way back to 1984. Actually, I'm not certain on the year. I know it was the early 80s, and I know that was a particularly good year, but I stumbled upon the Monster Manual at a store, a fantasy books store over here in Illinois, and I was with my grandmother, and she was like, I said, I want that. I want to take that home. I was big into monsters, and it just seemed to be, well, it was a manual of monsters. And I loved folklore, but that was kind of my gateway in. She bought it, apprehensively, because people worshiped the devil back then when they played Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. But it was, I didn't look back, I think, after that. And after I bought that, I, took it to school with me every day. And some of the older kids, more, like some of the older brothers who were playing at the time had the basic set and all of those sorts of things. And I wanted to be, it was hilarious, back then. I wanted to be cool. I wanted to play Dungeons and Dragons with the, the older brothers. And that was how
Chris
got up to the table.
Yeah. I have a very similar story. It was, I think it was 82 for me. And my older brother's best friend played and introduced us. And I just wanted to be cool. So you got to play D&D. Little did I know at the time.
I love that though, that it was, it is kind of is kind of cool now. It is mainstream popular culture now, but in my mind back then, I was like, I want to do this nerd thing that, is going to raise my level of coolness. Absolutely. Absolutely. And then a few years later, I realized that the cool kids played football and things.
Yeah.
All right, Luke, how about you? How did you get introduced to this wild world of tabletop RPGs?
It was not the cool thing to be doing in high school, but I picked it up, I think, junior, senior year of high school, just briefly. A little bit of D&D, a little bit of a homebrew thing we kind of kludged together with basically just a single 10-sided die because, you could whip that out any place, during class when the teacher's not looking and just play for a few seconds, put the die away and you're done. And then I took a long break between high school and basically I was part of the wave that got sucked in when 5th edition got released. I'd played maybe half dozen times, 3.5 D&D 3.5 in the middle there. But yeah, I mean, I really just didn't pick it up hardcore until 5th edition came out. So I'm relatively new to be really totally sucked into the hobby. So yeah, but since 5th edition though, it's been a ton of fun. I've run, oh God, I mean, more hours than I can imagine, probably, or than I can recount. And it's all been 5th edition though. So that's I kind of fall in the realm of like, I don't want to have to learn a whole lot of systems. I just want to basically tell stories with my friends. And I don't want to have to remember like 6 different rule sets to do it. So I kind of am lazy in that way, I guess. But so yeah, 5th edition for me, and pretty much almost exclusively.
Okay. Now, Chris, did you expand and play other games besides D&D?
And not until I got to college. I think it was all D&D up until then. And then once college hit, I found Vampire the Masquerade and the entire White Wolf universe that we've probably explored all of those games. The Marvel Universe, the original Marvel Universe gaming system was something that we played quite often. We made up our own superheroes. We didn't play any of the Marvel heroes, but we were our own comic book heroes. And then I guess I played some Warhammer, got into war gaming, but it's mostly a mixture of the sort of the darker Gothic setting, and then I eventually came back around to D&D. I think college was more, was less about fantasy and more about science fiction and modern fantasy. Because I even dabbled a bit with Star Wars, the early the D6 system with the wild die, and I think that's about it. Cyberpunk maybe. For a bit, the original. Yeah.
I read the cover off of my Cyberpunk book. I never played it once. I made like 400 characters with that book. Never played a single game.
Oh,
I love that old Cyberpunk book.
Oh man. Oh gosh. You would probably believe I have like shelves full of games that I've just never gotten to play, but that's the way it goes, I think. But yeah, that's really interesting. I always find it interesting to see where people kind of come from. So then, Luke, you said you really dove into 5e now. Did you start running games pretty quickly, or did you play for a while? But now you said you've run quite a bit, right?
Well, I think the first time I played 5th edition, the first time I played 5th edition, I was running the game.
Oh, okay.
So after like a couple warm up games of like where I played in people's 3.5 campaigns, I just went ahead and started running because basically I wanted to play 5th edition and nobody was interested in running a game at that point. So I was like, yeah, I guess I'll do that. Sure. And yeah, it was, it's been a ton of fun. I'm a writer by trade. I'm a storyteller by trade. And so having the ability to, let me back that up. I'm a storyteller by trade, and traditionally, being a storyteller, in my experience, has been a fairly lonely pursuit. It's, when you're writing, it's you and the page, right? And there's not, it's kind of a one-man show. What I've found that I love so much about being a dungeon master is that you're telling the story and you're doing it collaboratively. That's to me been a huge revelation. And ever since I started running games, all of my creative endeavors have been with partners. So working with Chris on the game books that we've created for copperhoard.com is an example of that. I've started tandem writing books with a friend of mine. I'm in a band now, and that's an immense creative collaboration. So really, running games has been pretty transformative for me in a lot of the ways of how I approach my craft and how I approach my life. Honestly, so it's been a heck of a ride these last few years.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, and I know we'll dive into some more of that. But now, first, Chris, you said you started playing, and then you played a lot of those different systems. Did you start running games pretty quickly, or did you play for a long time before you ran a game?
I played for a long time. The only games I ever really ran there was a stint that I did for a few years where I ran some Palladium systems, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game.
Yeah.
I totally dug those comics, so I figured, this is probably the game for me to run. And then I think it took a long while until I got to fourth edition. I ran for a bit, and since I was kind of big with the miniatures, I was kind of cool with acclimating, some of our groups to, getting miniatures and having, a little bit more combat on the table. But as life as a professor is very much like the life of a game master, in a way that my job is planning out scenarios in order to get students to work together as a team. It was way too much like a job for me. I probably could run a game quite well, and plan out back settings and do all of those things, but maybe after I retire from being a teacher, because it takes. I respect and understand how much it takes out of a person to have 5 people down at the table, much less running a class full of 15 to 25 students on a daily basis. So nothing but respect, but I'm mostly a player.
Okay. Yeah. And that is why I have gone mostly no prep for my games because, I'm not 16 anymore, and then just have 20 hours just to wheedle away at things. But so I completely understand. So Luke, why don't I just follow up here real quick? I know obviously a lot of people who listen to the podcast are running games. We're all trying to level up, if you will, running games. Since you just kind of jumped in with 5e and have been running games now for a few years, what are some things you have learned about running 5e?
So I think the thing I've tried to cultivate in the people at my table, or the kind of environment I like to cultivate with my players, is one where I try to get them to get themselves into the heads of their characters more than they might otherwise. So in my experience, there are folks who kind of lean more towards the simulation and the math and the crunch. Right, people who are more interested in kind of optimizing characters and playing the game aspect of D&D. I'm really much more interested in the story aspect of D&D. So I may fudge a rule here or there, in the interest of just trying to maintain, helping my players maintain the kind of story they were looking to tell. So whether that's funny or suspenseful or dramatic. So I think the thing that I've learned most about running games has been just kind of listening to the players and what kind of where are they wanting, where's their sensibility? Is it goofy and fun? Is it, we want to have something that's big and epic and dramatic, something that's scary. And so listening to the player and then just basically, kind of crafting the world in such a way as to help this, facilitate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think being on the same page, the game master and their players being on the same page is like the hugest deal, right? Like that is like the biggest thing that you can do, as long as if you as a game master know where your players kind of enjoy and they know what you kind of enjoy, then life is a lot easier as a dungeon master. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Something else I've had them do is at the beginning of every game. I ask them 3 questions. I ask them, okay, what is your name, race, and class? Just to remind everybody who's at the table with us. Mm-hmm. What's one important thing you remember from last time? Because what that tells me is what they're prioritizing. What was interesting to them from last time that we want to pick up on and pursue this time? And then the third question changes every time. It's always something about their character, whether it's their appearance or their backstory. What does your character smell like? What does your character dress like? What is your character, what's your character's relationship with their father? things like that. So and so continually just like grabbing onto more and more little micro story hooks that we can kind of weave in later on and try and make the experience more rich and interesting for the player.
Yeah, absolutely. That sounds awesome. I have to admit, though, I've never asked a player to tell me about their character's mother or something in too great of detail. I don't know, but
I've had more than one who, really got like things got serious when they first started talking about their mothers. Like they had a whole thing planned out that they didn't share with me ahead of time, but they knew their mother. The mother was not a place I wanted to go with that character, interestingly enough.
Yeah. Although I must admit, I'm guilty of creating some elaborate backstories every once in a while, but I try to get over that.
Well, let me ask you a question. So,
sure.
When you have a table where you have a person who turns in like 2 lines of backstory, he's a barbarian and he kills things, and then next chair down, somebody who hands you a 6-page elaborate backstory, probably with like dialogue written in and footnotes, hyperlinks, somebody who really took some pains to make their character. How do you work with get those two people on the same page? Have you had an experience like that?
Oh, absolutely. And I won't admit if I've done maybe a 19-page backstory or anything like that, but yeah, absolutely. I've come across that, and I think it just I think a lot of it depends on the type of game you're playing. If it is a Dungeons and Dragons 5e game, I might tell the person with the 6-page story, backstory with hyperlinks and some dialogue to kind of, I won't tell them directly, but I'll try to assess to see if they're okay if that character dies, because in D&D characters die. The barbarian with 2 sentences, that player is probably cool if if that character dies, because they probably have 87 of them on D&D Beyond ready to go. So I will try to get their sense of what we're doing. Now, if we were playing some other game, if we were playing maybe like a Star Trek game or a game that has a life path system, well, of course, I expect you to know that your previous 7 tours and that you served on the USS Poseidon, and you won the Starfleet Medal of Valor on your cadet cruise or something like that. I expect that because the characters probably aren't going to die except for a rare occasion of like a big heroic moment at some key moment. But in D&D 5e, if we're starting off, especially at level 1 or even in level 3, and say like an adventure like Curse of Strahd, level 3 in character, in Curse of Strahd can die by direwolf at like any moment, right? Like,
sure.
So I want to make sure that the players are kind of okay. Now, some people are just, maybe they're a writer, maybe they're just super creative, and they're just like, oh yeah, I whipped up this 8-page backstory and it's awesome. And yeah, I have, 4 other characters that I brought tonight, and I've been wanting to try out a warlock. So if they die, I'm cool, and you're just like, oh, okay. But like, I really want to make sure we're on the same page, that it's like, hey, look, this game is D&D. We're probably going to die every once in a while. Are we cool with that? And if somebody's not, then we either reset the game expectations in some way, or we just convince people that actually character death is fine occasionally, right?
Very empathetic answer you're rocking there. I like that. I like that better than, oh, that's the person who's going to die first. I'm going to make sure I'm going to target that person who crafted this beautiful backstory, and they're going down first.
Well,
because
that's
not how I would do it, but I could see that being a great pastime, a great mini game for the DM to play. Yeah. Who can I depress the most?
Yes. And obviously, I've been playing since I was 9 years old. I the first time I ran a game was the day after the first time I played. So like I've been running games for a long time. I have done every mistake, right? Like I have, if somebody's brought something and it just like made me mildly upset, I killed them. I did everything wrong, right? Like I did everything wrong. And it put me, to a place to where now I can understand, kind of what people are going for. But like the biggest problem is usually just, the level one, the level one wizard, and we're starting a campaign, and you're just, or even just doing a session and somebody brings a level one wizard and they're like, he is the heir to the whatever, so-and-so. And you're just like, God, he's going to be dead. Like, I mean, he's probably going to die. Like I'm not targeting him, but like, seriously, like, you're probably going to have, how many hit points, right? Like 4 to 6 hit points or something, right?
Sure,
like, I mean, so be ready, right? So, you just have to make sure your expectations of the game are set and know that it's like, hey, it's lethal, right? I mean, you can die and that's okay. We'll get our we'll get our party kind of sorted out by the time we're, at level 3 and, everybody will have an awesome character. But, I think that is always the biggest problem. Like the person who comes with the 2-sentence one, usually you can get them to tease out some stuff if you just ask them a few questions. Say, your barbarian. It says he was a soldier and all of his family was killed. Okay, well, and then. When was his family killed? How were they killed? Why were they killed? And then I might start asking leading questions, right? Oh, okay. So your family was killed. Why was your family killed by the queen? And I'm going to start, putting in leading questions. So they're forced to kind of start thinking about, some of those things. The 6-page backstory, if you're level 1, I think it's a bit much, but it just all depends. It depends on your group and, just don't, like you said, don't be the jerk like I was when I was 14 and running games and on some kind of GM power trip because I wasn't playing football and I wasn't cool and this is my thing, and this is where I get my fun, or whatever. And so I passed through that. I've shed a lot of that and I hopefully have matured from that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have found that I personally, of the 2, I think I prefer the ones who have a minimal backstory just because that gives us a chance to kind of explore and figure them out as we go, which is lovely. And if there's a story need, sometimes I'll pull that person aside and say, hey, your mysterious backstory, that we haven't, sussed out yet. What if you were the son of this duke or something, just something that, to help move the story along a little bit more. So, which gives there's a little utility there, I think, for that kind of thing. So there's benefits to both. I mean, a really rich and detailed backstory gives you all kinds of opportunities to weave it into what you're doing. But an absence of story also is its own opportunity.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I think it's better to have. You shouldn't be a blank slate. I don't think you should have some kind of idea. And that really allows the game master then to pull that character into a world if they've thought of, some kind of pre-existing hooks and things already. Right. So, so I think you're absolutely right. It's when the backstory, like the joke, I usually say a 19-page backstory or whatever, but like when the backstory tries to encompass like everything, right? It gets a little frustrating because it's like, we're going on through the game or something and I'll be like, oh, okay. Remember that one time, when you were a child and this happened or whatever, then the player's like, no, that didn't happen. It says so right here on page 17, paragraph 34, line B that I did this when I was 14 or whatever. And you're just like,
yeah,
okay, we need to relax. We need to relax and give some space to work. Or, but I think too, though, there's always, a middle ground there, because like you said, like maybe if somebody does come with quite a bit of a backstory, that you can always find a way creatively to really kind of work your way in there as the game master and kind of pull them into your story. I remember a Star Wars game some years back, a player was like, her character, she's like, she was raised on a freighter just by her parents, and she's a Twi'lek, and she just grew up on the freighter, and didn't really know any. They were always going to different places, and her parents took her around, and like I had some ideas for what it was, so I was just like, your character's a Twi'lek, and you were raised, just like you said, on the Stocklight freighter by your parents, but you've always wondered. You're a Twi'lek, but you've always wondered why your parents were humans. And she was, the player was just like, she kind of stopped for a second and was like, oh, that's really good. Right. Like, and so right there, I took, a bit of her backstory that she came with and just put in what I was going to do, right? Because she was an orphan of actually like an ancient Jedi house, right? Which she didn't know at the time, but and she was raised by the retainers of that house who smuggled her out as a baby, right? Before they were slaughtered, so like that gave her then, she got to come up with the backstory, but I got to add in my game mastery stuff, to kind of give her an emotional hook into the adventure, into the campaign a bit more. And like I said, some players might freak out about that and be like, no, that didn't happen. That player, she's like, come on, man, or whatever. We're collaborative. Like you had mentioned before, Luke, that this is a collaborative medium, right? I'm not going to just pronounce a story from on high as the game master, and you are not just going to do the same thing as a player. We're going to work together, and it's hopefully, if not beautiful, it's going to be fun and entertaining, and we've had some good times with our friends. But I feel like I am talking a lot.
Well, I asked you a question, and I obviously poked the balloon. So.
Yeah, I know. Well, that's what I was saying before we started recording. It was like, there's usually not a problem talking, since we all love role-playing games. And we haven't even talked to Chris in a while. He's just sitting over here. Maybe I know. Did you make a warlock while we were talking?
Yeah, I've already rolled up 3 characters. I did want to. You guys are on a roll, but I did want to jump in on, as you were talking about the sort of death in the game, and how you, I guess, interface with the players and dungeon masters. I would mention that, at least in my groups, the way we would play, we like to have a very cinematic experience, and let me give you an example. Mm-hmm. I'm playing through with some buddies right now the 5e, the Storm King's Thunder. Mm-hmm. I'm at a point, there's 6 hit points left. We actually killed some things we shouldn't have been able to kill, but we did really well. We were fighting fire giants, and a few of them were running out of they were running away, and I took the moment, being the dwarf that I am, to draw a line across the road as where they're running out. And I full well knew, to the dungeon master, as sort of an unspoken thing, I have 6 hit points left. I'm completely okay with you killing me right now, but I am a dwarf. I hate these giants, and they're running away from this village. But it was a scene, not unlike the Conan the Barbarian, when the Cimmerian old man puts his sword across the road and dares Thulsa Doom and his minions to attack the village. Of course, that old man was ridden down and killed. But if I lived, which I did, he had the giants run off into a different direction because we got really lucky with some rolls. But it for one, it was my choice, to say like, I'm going to spend my life here, but it was also an incredibly dwarvish thing to do, with an incredibly stupid thing with only 6 hit points left. But the importance, I think, with death in the games that I play, or that it's not a insignificant thing. That it's, if you do something crazy, you do something heroic, you all imagine it in your minds, and you talk about those deaths years and years later about, remember when so and so, and when Aaron Raw did this crazy thing to save the village, and it was relatively spectacular, and you either rolled terrible or you rolled great. But I like that dynamic. I like that in a group full of people that are going to want to go on that real cinematic journey with each other.
Yeah.
Chris, do you ever hit a player that is addicted to that kind of thing? Because I have one player who has been trying to heroically sacrifice himself in the name of the party for literally 6 months now. And the party won't let him do it. And it is just driving him nuts. He wants to die. But
that's kind of an amazing character trait, though. Maybe that's like he won't die, but it's that ever living frustration.
Yeah.
Are people dying for him?
No, nobody's died yet. And here's the problem with a DM like myself, who's like way into story and not so much into game, is that I fall in love with my players' characters, and I will pull punches when I probably shouldn't, honestly. And I think that's a downside of my DM style. But yeah, so I have killed maybe 3 or 4 characters in my time. And of those, weirdly, 3 of them were played by the same person. And she is really not, I mean, every time it happens, I feel just terrible. And I apologize to her profusely because, like, again, I've only killed one other person beside her. So,
well, I think when I played Vampire the Masquerade for so many years, it's definitely a different system. It's less group based, and it actually is more competitive. And you do try and outshine, outmaneuver, and eventually kill the other players. It got me kind of less interested in the personal ties to the character, but more interested in sort of like a really intricate competition. And not everybody can do that. Not everybody can kind of step outside of that and realize that the story that you're weaving together, and eventually, you might kill the one character or the other character might kill you. But I remember those adventuring in those days where the game master would try and introduce story while I'm having conflict with another character. And we would both stop, we would cease our conflict, immediately crush the story. Any sort of like flair that they're trying to add to it. And then once we've crushed that, we go back to the competition, the chess game of, going back and forth. And that was when I kind of realized that it was more about the dance. There is a story, but after a while, when you play something for so long as a player, you realize and you hope that you are the story, as opposed to a rail that the dungeon master might be taking you along, or the game master might be taking you along, and it becomes more open world in that sense, and less module controlled. But that's all. I guess you only get that when you play for a very, very long time with the same people and you haven't wrung each other's necks, and you just kind of know that somebody's going to turn on a dime and just go off in another direction. But you full well have the confidence that this person can carry their own story. That's the thing. They're not there to screw the dungeon master over. They're there to take their interest to a different area. And I think you have to be a responsible player in that regard. If you're gonna go off the rails, better have something to do. You better have some ideas. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like what you're describing, Chris, is kind of my personal dream for how a DM should be. It should be, and it's like telling any story. A good story should be character driven first, and plot driven second. And so many times when you're running a game, or when I'm running a game, certainly, I feel like the plot is kind of pushing things along, and the characters are kind of buffeted along, by that plot, the thing coming out of the book that I purchased from Wizards of the Coast, right? But in a best case scenario, and I'm betting, Matt, you being somebody who is low prep and more improv at the table,
Mm-hmm.
I bet you your stories are probably, or your games are probably a lot more like that. Is that safe to assume?
Yeah, they're vastly more character driven because I don't have a plot sometimes, right? Like sometimes I've been taking a break right now, and I've been playing, and so that's been fun. Although I just ran a session last night of the Doctor Who role playing game, which I don't even know very well. I don't even know Doctor Who very well, but fortunately, the player who's playing the Doctor knows Doctor Who very well, and I have a few ideas for that one. I was able to come up with a few ideas. So I'm running it as a mystery, which I haven't done kind of a mystery, like a real mystery in a really long time. And the first couple times I tried, I messed it all up. So this is going to be kind of an experience with, an experiment with just a mystery, kind of like a full on mystery with clues and things like that. So I'm really kind of excited about that. But normally, say for a D&D game, or for say a science fiction game like a Star Wars game or something like that, I have my I'll come up with some kind of concept when I'm watching a movie, reading a book, or driving, or taking a shower, or whatever. I'll just think of a concept, and I'll put that out to my players, and usually they're for it, right? Because I try to be as creative as possible. I'm like, okay, it's a fantasy world. Your players are given an object, and they're told to follow this white stone road that seemingly goes on forever to rebuild a fallen empire, and my players usually are just like, Tuesday, when 6:30, and or whatever, they're just in, or a science fiction game, you say like, hey, Firefly, but you're superheroes, do you want to play? And people are like, done. Yeah. Like, when, and so, usually I'll just have something like that. And as they make their characters and I learn their characters' backstory, that's when we start, I start forming some ideas of maybe some different things that can happen. And I usually let it go, even to the fact of, a lot of times at the table, I'll just roll dice. We'll come up to a big, huge point that could be a plot point. And I'll just have a player, be like, okay, roll dice. And it's like, if you roll, 4 and above, this happens. If you roll 3 and below, that happens, and that could swing the campaign in a totally different direction. I've gotten really comfortable with that because I want to be surprised, right? Like I've played a lot. I've run a lot of games. I was bored a lot as the game master. I rammed my players through my stories enough to learn that was foolish. And so like, I want to be surprised. I want my players to surprise me. I want the story to be fun. Even last night, I had a few ideas, but always a player just totally surprises you with their solution to a problem. And so I like to take things that way. The best thing when I talk to people, we talk a lot about game master advice on the podcast, but one of the things that makes a great player is a very active player who is willing to do things and interact with even the slightest bit of stuff that the game master has thrown out. It's just like, there's an old ruined tower. You kind of see that in the distance as you're traveling along the road. Well, go to the tower, man. Like, I don't have to tell you to go to the tower. As a player, you should just be like, oh, let's go check out that tower, or, if I'm describing a science fiction game and I'm just like, all right, you're running cargo and stuff. There's, this planet here. It has an old space station kind of circling it. I want a player just to go, let's go to that space station. right? You know, it was like, I don't even know what's on the space station. I just said the word space station. They said that automatically. Then I know I need a space station stuff. And, you know, I've and God knows I've watched enough Star Trek and other science fiction to come up with, you know, space station stuff. Right. You know, the same with, you know, a ruined tower. It's just like, I know what's in a ruined tower, right? Like, I know because I've read all the stuff, right? You know, I've seen all the stuff. So, you know, coming up with what's in a ruined tower is not a big deal. But so yeah,
at the same time, though. At the same time, though, this is okay. So just to tattle on myself a little bit, I've written a fair number of one-offs, and that's kind of what the genesis of Copper Hoard has been. You know, these one-off adventures, you know, 1, 2, 3 night adventures that you got to pick up, put into a campaign, and run with, and those have been fun. But for my big long campaigns, the ones my main campaigns, I almost always run from a module. I've been running through usually a book from, you know, one of the 5th edition, you know, mainline books. So Curse of Strahd, Tomb of Annihilation, Out of the Abyss, and things like that. And the reason I do that is because, yes, I know what is typically in a tower, but I worry that I'm going to just kind of like lean on cliches. And what the nice thing about having a book is that they've kind of come up with some novel approaches to the genre, right? There are things in, you know, that I pick up in those books that I would never have thought of, you know, kind of, you know, small sub stories, interesting side characters. It's like stuff that just does not, you know, 100% jive with genre conventions. And so the nice thing about I've found running a module is that it takes care of the plot. It takes care of the bones of the adventure. And that kind of frees me up as a game master to listen to the characters and kind of move work with them to tell, you know, have the story move in the directions they want, without having to worry about the math, without having to worry about, like, is this a balanced encounter? Well, Wizards of the Coast took care of that for me. I don't have to worry about that. Is this enough loot? I don't have to worry about that because Wizards of the Coast did that for me. I will say they don't ever give enough loot, but that's kind of my own personal bias. So that's kind of where I come down on. But I do find myself thinking that I really feel like the next thing I need to try as a game master is to go low prep, is to go almost totally improv and just try to, you know, and now having done this enough times, you know, maybe it's time to just, you know, go out there and just, you know, let it all hang out and not worry so much about the bones of the thing. Just let it evolve naturally. Let's see where the players want to go and just kind of, you know, play it where it lays. So I think that's where I need to head next. Yeah,
and absolutely. And you made some great points there. The idea, you know, especially like, you know, I know a lot of people out there, they're working a full-time job. They're taking care of their families. They're swamped, and then they run in and they've got to run a session in like 15 minutes, right? And you're just like, after I've worked all day and dealt with the kids all day and dealt with, you know, all this other garbage all day, it's just like, I'm not going to come up with my most creative idea probably on the fly at, you know, 9:54 on a work day, you know, or whatever. And so I totally get that. That's why I create resource books to help people, you know, to come up with some of that stuff, because I was finding that, you know, can be the case as well. And then also, your point with the, you know, the modules, I mean, you have, you know, creative writers coming up with amazing stuff and kind of laying it all out there for you. The big problem I have with that, you know, I did run Curse of Strahd for my group because I hadn't run a module in like, I don't know, 20 years, because I just come up with my own stuff. So I ran Curse of Strahd. And my biggest problem with those is, when you're swamped with all your other stuff, when do you read a 300-page book, right? Like,
sure.
You know, or what modules can be great for too is even if you don't run the whole thing exactly, you can just grab ideas, you can grab maps out of them, you can just grab tidbits here and there, you can grab the NPCs out of it really quickly to throw them into some other adventure. You can just open up, Curse of Strahd and grab some NPCs and throw them where you're going, whatever you're doing, you can just do that. And so I think they're really great. But I mean, too, I think the idea is that, everybody's going to run a little bit differently. They're going to have their different styles. And, I should probably learn from people who do prep correctly because I usually do prep wrong. But if you want to learn from me when I, talk about, reacting to your players and stuff, I think that can be very helpful to people who are, sometimes you're just put on the spot and your gaming group is like, oh, well, we have like 5 people that want to play, but the game master fell through or something, or we don't have anything prepared, so we should cancel. I always hate that, right? Like that was the thing especially when I was younger, it was just like, when the game got canceled, it was just like, come on, like I've been waiting for this. I've been wanting to play. And so if, and this is really where, a lot of this no prep stuff came from. It was just like, if I'm sitting around and I have some friends over and we're talking and one of my friends, is like, man, do you still play D&D? And I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, man, I played like 15 years ago and I just haven't played in a long time. We should play sometime. And I'm like, I look at my watch and go, hey, it's 7:00. You guys were going to stay until, when do you have to leave? 11? Let's play. And they're just, and it blows people's minds sometimes, but it's just like, hey, right? Like, I don't need anything. You give me your characters. Tell me what your barbarian, how his family was killed. We get that. But now, I'm going to tell you just some idea and we can play. Right. Because I always hate the fact that, we're always like caught and we're just like, oh, well, you can't play. Oh, well, I could show you how to play, but, it'll be like in 4 months and we'll have to make this huge whole big production out of it. I just want to make it to where, hey, look, we can play. It's a game. We could pull out Pandemic and play Pandemic, although I don't know why really anybody's playing Pandemic anymore because we've had enough of that. But it's still a great game. But, or Monopoly or whatever. Just pull out a game and play. Well, I think D&D, you should just be able to pull out and play. But anyway, I've been talking a lot. We've been talking a long time. Chris, why don't you tell us about Copper Hoard before we run out of time?
Copper Hoard in spirit is something that Luke and I dreamed up to kind of a way to kind of channel all of our creative things in the realm of game design, 5e in particular. But we had hoped that it would over time, which we still are throwing that around, that it'd be a place where game designers can kind of come and be a part of a professional community. There's a lot of professional communities in St. Louis right now for various different arts, and a lot of support communities for game design. We thought we would start our own and see if that would snowball up to starting to attract other people to see us and say, oh, well, those guys are making games and putting it up on the D&amp Guild, and I can do that too. So the inspiration, I think, is part of it. But also I think that like Luke was talking about earlier, if you have people that you're collaborating with, it's easier sometimes to just sort of put it this way, if someone's depending on you for art or someone's depending on you for story or those things, the deadlines mean so much more than if you're just working on something yourself, you're like, I'll just hold off on that. So the having other people, having a group of people to work with, even if it's just us two right now, I think is imperative for creation in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I absolutely agree with that. Yeah. And I feel like the older I get, the more I crave that back and forth, that creative, flow that you get with two people working on the same thing and trying to like suss out, a creative world together. Yeah, I absolutely agree. Collaboration. I mean, it's at the heart of role playing, and it's, it kind of carries through into the spirit of Copper Hoard. We go back and forth so much on the concepts on our games that we've put together that, they're both of our babies for sure.
And it's good to have other people in cooking in the kitchen, purely because when from the art standpoint, you're rarely happy with it fully, with with the art that you're putting out there. I feel good about my art at this point in my career, but there's still always some things that I see, and I'm like, oh, that's a bit wrong. That's a bit. The lighting is a little bit strange in that. The foreshortening is a little bit off on that arm. And it's always good to have another person to go, you might want to change that, or that's a little, with me, I draw things that are a little bit too dark sometimes. And to have another person to push me to a little bit to say, well, you should maybe go back to the drawing board on that. And that's not, it's a good kind of criticism, because we know that, as I know in my head, that I'm letting some things go through just purely because we need to get to a deadline. It's good to have that kind of editing, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. As I say that, I do most of all my books by myself, but with a few proofreaders and that. But no, I absolutely get what you're saying there. It's really interesting. And so maybe Luke, what are some of the adventures that you guys have created so far?
Well, so as I mentioned earlier, we were they've all been games that I've. Sorry. So all of the adventures we've done so far have been one-offs or two-offs or three-offs that I put together for friends and family, and each one of them kind of serves its own unique niche. So there's, I don't know if you've noticed or not, Matt, but there's a lot of gaming materials out there. If you go on Dungeons and Masters Guild, there is a ton of adventures out there. And so if we're going to do something, I feel like it really needs to be something that nobody else is doing, or nobody else has done quite the same way. And so every adventure we put out has kind of its own unique spin. So just I could go on, but I'll just kind of give you a quick overview of the three big books that we have out. We have three main adventures, and then we have some ancillary materials that go along with each. But the first one we did is called Child God of the Violet Temple. And what I wanted to do was I wanted to do a heist adventure where basically I created a dungeon with the Violet Temple, but in order to get into the Violet Temple, the question is, how does your team get in? So kind of an Ocean's 11 type affair. So here are all the different ways you can get into the temple. Here's what you will find in the city around the temple that might help you get into the temple. What are the different tools? What are the different characters and methodologies you can employ to get into the temple and conduct this heist? So it's as much a source book about the city and the building and the people that live in and around it as it is an adventure. So basically, I was hoping to give the characters as much agency as they could to kind of, okay, here are some things I've learned about the city. Here are some things I've learned about the temple. How are we going to use our particular skill set to capitalize on those opportunities to get us into the temple to achieve our objective, which is to basically kidnap a baby. I
just had a flash of Willow. I stole the baby kind of through my head.
Beautiful.
No, it sounds awesome. It sounds really cool. I know.
And the other, Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No,
the other one I'd like to bring up, if that's okay, is one called the Vampire Factory of Mad. Oh my God, help me! It's a long title. Mad Baron Petrifax. Yes, the Vampire Factory of Mad Baron Petrifax. That's a long one. So I had a situation where I had 10 people who were all simultaneously interested in learning to play Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, okay. Here's what we'll do. So I wrote an adventure which basically serves as a tutorial. So as you run the adventure, the book drops in little bits of dialogue that the dungeon master, often a new dungeon master, can read to the group and say, and here's why you're doing this thing. Here's what a check is. Here's what a skill check is. Here's how you do it. You're going to roll a die. You're going to add this number. And what this does is it shows you whether or not you succeed at this thing you're trying to do. And that it just basically walks them through all the mechanics up to including combat, including, all the different facets. Basically, it's basically meant to be a tutorial adventure to walk people quickly and easily through a game. And then by the end of the game, you're just playing the game. You're not worried that the rules eventually fall away and you're just playing and involved in the vampire factory of Mad Baron Petrifax. So yeah, anything we do, any of the adventures we do, we try to have it be something unique, something that you're not going to find anywhere else, something that's going to help you in a way or give you something that your players will hopefully never forget.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because Sea Prison of the Furies is timed.
Yeah, so
that's one of the things the metric I think is really interesting, especially with players who just like to fuddle around and not really move the story forward. This one actually pushes you forward because the clock is ticking.
No shopping trips.
Yeah, that was born out of I had never run a game at a convention before, and I found myself at Archon, the St. Louis science fiction fantasy convention that where I met Matt, actually, where we met Matt. Mm-hmm. I ran a game there for the first time, and I was like really nervous about how do I get people through an adventure, knowing I've only got 3 hours with these people, I'm never going to see them again. I was like, well, I'll just set a clock, and if they can't get through it in 3 hours, then the boat leaves without them, and they're stuck in the Sea Prison of the Furies for the rest of their lives.
Well, there you go.
And it worked great. It worked beautifully. So I took that and turned it into what we have in the book today. Yeah.
Nice. I know we've been on here a long time and we've been just like yammering about role playing, which is awesome. But I do want to ask a few more questions real quick. So Chris, when you, if Luke brings you a project, what are some of, what are you thinking when you're going to do the art for it? Do you kind of lean back on some of the greats that came before, or how do you kind of approach that?
I ask for a world Bible. I'm probably most influenced by the older black and white styles of like first and second edition. Actually, some of the stuff that probably the folks who are like seeing the very painterly covers of today are just like, oh, well, that art was bad. But I do love that art, that sort of Goodman Games, Dungeon Crawl Classics style art. Mm-hmm. I do have some painterly qualities. I mean, I have done some of the covers, or not some of the covers. I've done all the covers, but the color is kind of a new thing for me. But usually it's he sends me a world Bible with some inspiration. With 3 levels of them, gotta have, be nice if we have, and there's 3 levels. I can't remember what it was, Luke, but there's like certain things that have to have illustrations, and then also usually what happens is I look and I'm like, oh, dude, there's a giant spider in this one. I want to draw a giant spider. Or with Sea Prison of the Furies, I'm like, you mean there's a scene with 3 minotaurs where there's a pit fight on a ship deck? I definitely want to draw that, and then of course that I talked him into the cover. I don't remember what we had for the cover originally with that, but I'm just like, I got it. That has to be on the cover. That's awesome. So that's usually how it works, and how I work with just writers in general. The more things that they give me in sort of like that world Bible, like I'd like armor that kind of looks like this, or use these colors. I'm really open to just sort of like taking the puzzle pieces of kind of what's in the writer's head and kind of putting it together in something that I guess, and just whatever comes out of me at that time. But that's kind of how I work personally. I collect lots and lots of reference, and I combine things and mix and match and photo bash stuff. But there's usually always a few images that I kind of jump on first that really, really inspire me, and then I flesh out the rest of the world that kind of has to do with that book. whichever book we're working on.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. And now, Luke, so if you're putting these together as the writer, what elements do you think make a great adventure?
Interesting. That's a great question.
I stumped him. All right.
I really never thought of it in quite so abstract terms. All I do is kind of create the adventure that I think that the people I'm going to be playing with would enjoy. Mm-hmm. What is it that's going to light them up? And I knew that the people I was going to be playing the big 10-person, everybody learning D&D for the first time game. I knew vampires were gonna slay for those folks, and so what do I think it makes a great adventure? I think it really is just coming back to the whole collaboration thing. What is it that the people that you are going to be playing with would enjoy? It's kind of like the old axiom, when you write the book that you want to read. Mm-hmm. It's tell the adventure that that people that you want to impress, people that you want to have a good time with would enjoy. Mm-hmm. And I think the rest really does kind of take care of itself. That said, I do have some very specific ideas about how books are laid out and how best to get the information into the hands of the game master. So while I love the books that Wizards comes out with for D&D 5, I feel like there's a lot to be said about how they actually lay those books out to make it accessible, that information accessible and easily usable by the game master. You cannot just sit down with a book from Wizards and just run the game. I probably spend way more prep time reading and taking notes and analyzing and organizing my notes that come out of those books than I would if I were just doing a low prep game or what have you. And so with the design of the books, I do the layout for the book. Chris does the art, but I do the layout of the books, how the information is organized and how it's presented. My goal is basically to make it so that you can sit down with this book at the table and hopefully just be able to run it without a whole lot of pre-prep. You should be able to find the information, organize the information. The information should be organized on the page in such a way that's easy to navigate. Mm-hmm. So that's maybe not as sexy and aspirational as they should have this many enemies and this many heroes or whatever. But that's what I think of when I sit down to work on the books.
No, that makes perfect sense. And I think it is always good to hear that people are thinking about that for people who are buying resources, that it's just like, we want the designers and the writers, right, to be thinking about how to make our lives easier, right? As a game
absolutely.
Master. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
when I ran Out of the Abyss, which was my first game after 5th edition came out, it occurred to me like about a month into running that game, I actually didn't know what the players were supposed to be trying to do other than get out of the Underdark. Mm-hmm. It's like, where are we going? Because unless you read the entire 300-page book, and really even then it doesn't do a very good job of saying what exactly the arc of the story is meant to be, Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like, so the first thing I have in every book is like, here's the point of this thing. Here's what you're trying to do.
Yeah, that's a good paragraph or a couple paragraphs right there.
That is paragraph 1, page 1 every time.
Exactly. No, that's good. I always find it too, like when I ran Curse of Strahd, now don't get me wrong, Curse of Strahd is amazing and it's a beautiful book, very well written. It's super creative. Come on, right? It's awesome. But there are times when there's information in the book and it's just like, that was awesome and super creative, but I don't know how my players would ever know that. Yeah. Right. I don't know how to communicate that to them. What is it? Madame Ava is Strahd's half sister. And there was this whole thing about the king and all this stuff. And you're just like, I have no way to give that to my players. Like there's no mechanism for me to give that to my players.
That's when they have prophetic dreams.
That's what I was going to say. Unless they have a dream, or Madam Ava is just like, "Did you know?" You know,
you feel like such a hack doing that. Though.
I know.
I've dropped so many prophetic dreams on my players. I just know they're just like inwardly rolling their eyes every time somebody falls asleep. It's like, here comes another prophetic dream. Who's going to drop some more exposition on us?
Yeah. Why is Matt telling us like you when you're camping tonight? Why is he starting something like that? It doesn't seem too exciting. Oh yeah, I'm going to give you some exposition, right? Or whatever. I just always find it interesting. It's just like, it is really cool information, and then it's just like, my players are never going to see that. It's like, I thought it was awesome, but like, how do I get my players to see it? I don't know. It's just always, there's always a tension, right? I mean, obviously nothing's perfect in the way that we're going to be, and everybody runs the thing different, right? That's another thing about our, the hobby, right? Everybody's who bought the book Curse of Strahd ran that game different, right? Like, I guarantee you, sure, it was all run differently. It's just like, so the designers are in kind of this situation where they're like, well, I don't know how people are going to use this, and I can't cover every case that would be possible. So I'm going to do these things. You use that to build off of, and you just have to figure out some way. And yes, you had a dream. Yeah. Well, anyway, I'm keeping you on. I mean, we probably can keep going for like another hour, but it is late. I want to respect your guys' time and everything. Like, Chris, why don't you tell us where we can learn more about Copper Hoard and whatever else you're up to? And then I'll ask you, Luke, as well.
Well, copperhoard.com is the place where it's kind of the jumping off point for all of our adventures and source books that will take you to the DM's Guild. I mean, you could search through all the numerous amazing games in the DM's Wheel, but this is kind of the place, copperhoard.com, where all of our work is bundled together.
Okay. And I will be sure to put that link in the show notes at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who's listening now can head over there and check out Copper Hoard. Luke, how can people learn more about you? Obviously Copper Hoard, but is there anything else people should know?
Well, if you don't mind me dropping a kind of a tangential plug, I'm also the lead singer for a local St. Louis band by the name of Ars Arcanum. We are a Dungeons and Dragons themed metal band. And we are finally out performing live again after a year and plus off for COVID. So we just dropped our first EP on Spotify. So if you're interested, it's ARS space ARCANUM. Look us up on your streaming service of choice. We'd love to rock for you.
Okay, and I
got to work on a better tagline. That's terrible. Can you edit that out, please?
Sorry, it stays in.
Oh, my band is going to kill me.
Yeah, we'll work on taglines. I'll send you some. I'll send you a few ideas later or something. But,
is there a random tagline book you have?
A random tagline? That would be a good one. That would be a good one. I do have random song titles in one of them. So bards, you can pull out some song titles for bards. Most are based on like puns on popular songs because why not?
I love that.
Yeah. They would work perfectly for like the whole bardcore movement that started during the pandemic as well, which is awesome.
For sure.
Yeah. But I will be sure to link to your band as well in the show notes, as long as I don't forget. But I should not forget because I'm making a note of it right now. But, so Chris and Luke, it was great having you on the show today. Like I said, I could still go on talking about this, but I definitely want to respect your time. So Chris, Luke, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much, Matt. Have a great day.
All right, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Luke and Chris today. As I mentioned in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com, I have included links so you can learn more about Luke and Chris's D&D adventures and learn more of what they're doing at the Copper Hoard. So please, please head over there right now and check those out. All right. If you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. Get 10 free dungeon maps. You'll never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you'll get an email update from me letting you know what is going on in the world of Dice Geeks. All right, guys, it is always a pleasure to come to you each and every Wednesday with an incredible interview of a game designer, writer, role player, game master, filmmaker, whatever, novelist. Did I say that already? Whatever. I love interviewing creative people whose knowledge can help us become better game masters, better role players through learning about story structure, learning about how they run games, how they design games, how they tell stories. So I hope you get a lot out of these interviews because I know I do. I learn something new each and every time I talk to a different game master, a different role player, or a different storyteller. All right. Well, anyway, guys, thank you so much for listening. And until next Wednesday, keep gaming.